Midway through Can't Help Falling in Love, Elvis spotted movement in the front row. A boy, maybe 8, held up a crumpled scrap of paper, hands shaking. The king stopped singing. 15,000 people went silent. Stage lights caught the note as he took it, and froze. This is one of the most emotional moments ever seen at an Elvis concert, and it happened in front of thousands. Stay with me to the end, because what came next still gives fans chills. The first chord rang out, but Elvis's eyes weren't on the band. They were locked on a boy in the front row. It was the mid-1970s, Las Vegas. A sold-out casino showroom. Golden fringe on Elvis's jacket caught the spotlights with each move. A haze of cigarette smoke curled toward the ceiling, blurring the chandeliers above. The crowd's low murmur swelled into cheers as the king took center stage. Witnesses recall the sharp crack of the snare drum kicking off Can't Help Falling in Love. Every camera in the room pointed toward him. Every camera except mine. I was in row 3, and my eyes had locked on something else. Just left of center stage, a child sat beside his mother. 8 years old, maybe. His hair neatly combed. An oxygen tube traced along his cheek and behind his ears, glinting under the stage lights. In his hands, a folded scrap of paper, edges worn soft from being gripped too tightly. He didn't wave it. He didn't shout. He just waited, eyes fixed on Elvis as if there was no one else in the room. Halfway through the verse, Elvis's head tilted slightly. He took a step forward. The spotlight followed. I could see it. The exact second Elvis spotted the boy. His singing slowed. Just a fraction. Barely enough for the casual fan to notice. From where I sat, I could hear the hiss of the stage amps between notes. Smell the heavy mix of cologne, beer, and the faint sweetness of the flowers decorating the edge of the stage. The air was warm, heavy. Then, without warning, Elvis walked toward the lip of the stage. The cheers softened into confusion, then into silence. Mary Collins, a longtime fan sitting just behind the boy, later said, "It was like the whole place leaned forward at once. You could hear chairs creak. Nobody wanted to miss a second." Elvis crouched slightly, extending a hand. The boy hesitated, then stood, small and unsteady, and placed the note in the king's palm. Under the bright stage lights, the paper looked almost too thin to hold any weight, but whatever was written on it stopped Elvis cold. He didn't unfold it right away. He just stood there, staring at the boy. Then, slowly, he opened the paper. The audience held their breath. 1 second. 2. Elvis's smile faded into something softer. He glanced back at the band, then down at the words again, his jaw tight. And in that moment, you could feel it. The song was gone. Something more important had taken its place. Elvis held the note under the spotlight, reading it once more before folding it carefully and slipping it into his jacket pocket. He read it once, then again. The microphone picked up only his breathing. According to those close enough to see, the message was short. My wish is to sing with you before I can't anymore. No explanation, no detail, just those words, written in a child's uneven print, pressed into the page hard enough to dent it. A ripple went through the crowd, whispers, shuffling, the faint squeak of a chair as someone leaned forward. The band waited, frozen in place. The steady tap of a drummer's stick against the snare was the only sound besides the low hum of the amplifiers. The smell of hairspray from the front rows mixed with the sharper bite of aftershave. Even that seemed still, like the air itself was holding its breath. Elvis folded the note once, very carefully, and slid it into the inside pocket of his jacket. Not stuffed, but placed, as if it was fragile. He stepped forward, the toe of his white leather shoe catching the light. Kneeling slightly, he looked the boy in the eye. "What's your name, son?" The boy hesitated, glancing at his mother. "Eddie," he said quietly. The king smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. His gaze lingered on the oxygen tube before he stood upright again. Instead of turning to the microphone, Elvis walked toward the band. From the audience, it looked like he was calling for a change. He leaned toward the guitarist, said something unheard, then looked back at the boy. Whatever Elvis decided, he didn't act on it right away. Instead, he let the tension strike. The crowd's cheers from earlier had faded into an almost reverent quiet, the kind usually reserved for the last notes of a song. He paced the width of the stage once, then returned to the center. The spotlight was warmer now, a sharp white glow cutting through the haze of smoke. You could see dust motes drifting in its beam. A few camera flashes popped from the balcony, but no one shouted for attention. All eyes were on Elvis. Finally, he took the microphone from the stand. His voice was steady, but quieter than before. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "I think we have a duet tonight." The audience erupted, a swell of cheers and applause, some people rising from their seats. But Elvis didn't move yet. He looked back at Eddie and motioned for him to come forward. Eddie's mother stood, steadying her son. The boys' small shoes squeaked against the polished floor as they made their way to the edge of the stage. Elvis crouched again, offering a hand. Eddie took it, and the king gently pulled him up under the light. Elvis leaned down, saying something only Eddie could hear. The boy nodded. Then Elvis turned to the crowd with a half smile, the kind that says something big is about to happen. The band shifted, ready for a song no one had expected. A single spotlight dropped to the boy as the arena faded into darkness. The audience quieted instantly, the noise falling away, until all you could hear was the faint hiss of the amps and the shuffle of feet on the stage. The rest of the showroom blurred into shadows. Only Eddie and Elvis were visible in the bright, hot cone of light. Elvis set the microphone stand low, the metal screeching softly. As he adjusted it to Eddie's height, he knelt, his white jumpsuit sparkling where the sequins caught the beam. "Ready, buddy?" Elvis asked, voice low enough that it didn't carry past the first few rows. Eddie gave a small nod, his grip still tight on Elvis's hand. Elvis looked up at the band and gave a single nod. The opening chords of "Love Me Tender" floated out, slow and gentle. Eddie leaned toward the microphone. His voice was faint, almost a whisper at first, but steady. Elvis didn't overpower him. He matched Eddie's volume, letting the boy's voice sit in the front of the mic. The first stanza passed like that. Two voices, one soft and new, the other warm and familiar, blending into something the room had never heard before. From the seats you could see the stage lights reflecting off the chrome of the mic stand. You could hear the faint squeal of feedback when Eddie stepped too close. Someone in the audience quietly sobbed, their breath catching between lines. By the second line, people began leaning forward, hands clasped under their chins. Some smiled through tears. A woman in the third row dabbed at her eyes with a cocktail napkin. The sound wasn't loud yet, just a hum of emotion moving through the crowd. Until the last line, when the final "I love you so" landed. The room erupted as applause thundered. Elvis reached into his back pocket and pulled out a silk scarf. He draped it around Eddie's neck, the ends brushing against the boy's chest. The crowd roared even louder, some rising to their feet. Camera flashes popped like tiny fireworks from the balcony. But it's what Elvis did next that still has fans talking. Decades later, as the applause softened, Elvis crouched again. He leaned close, his lips near Eddie's ear. No one in the crowd could hear what he said, only Eddie's quiet nod in reply. Eddie's mother wiped at her eyes as Elvis gave the boy's shoulder one last squeeze. The king stood, replaced the microphone, and faced the audience. But instead of introducing the next song, he turned his back and led Eddie gently toward the side of the stage. Whatever was about to happen next, it wasn't part of the show. Elvis turned his back to the crowd for the first time all night. With one hand resting on Eddie's small shoulder, he guided him toward the far wing of the stage. The glare of the spotlight faded as they stepped into the dim amber glow of the sidelights. From the audience, you could still see the shimmer of Elvis's suit in the shadows, but you couldn't hear what was being said. A stagehand named Carl Bennett later recalled, "He wasn't rushing. He was talking to the kid like they'd known each other forever. Then I saw him reach into his pocket." Elvis pulled out a guitar pick. Plain white, with a faint thumb-worn sheen. He crouched to Eddie's level. "You'll need this for your next show," he told him, smiling just enough to crease the corners of his eyes. Eddie turned it over in his palm like it was made of gold. Behind them, the band's instruments hummed faintly with idle electricity. The faint smell of hot stage cables mixed with the cool draft from the loading door. Eddie's mother stood a step back, her hand over her mouth. Elvis gave Eddie's shoulder a gentle squeeze, then stood and turned toward the light again. When he stepped back into the main stage glow, the cheer that rose up wasn't just applause. It was gratitude. He gripped the microphone, looked out over the crowd, and launched into a driving up-tempo number. It was like flipping a switch. The showman was, for the audience, that moment with the boy became one of the night's highlights, but for Eddie it was only the beginning. And then, just when everyone thought the story was over, a package arrived at the boy's home. The details of that night would be told and retold in fan circles for decades, but no one, not even Eddie's mother, could have predicted what would arrive on their doorstep just days later. Cut to black, on the word package. A week later, a delivery truck stopped in front of a small Nevada house. It was early afternoon, the kind where the heat rippled above the asphalt and cicadas buzzed in the distance. Eddie's mother opened the door to find a uniformed driver holding a long, battered guitar case. "There's no return address," the driver said, handing her a clipboard. Eddie peeked from behind her, eyes fixed on the case like it might disappear if he blinked. The latches gave a soft click-click as his mother released them. The hinges creaked faintly, and the faint scent of polished wood escaped into the air. Inside lay a sunburst acoustic guitar. The lacquer finish caught the light, glowing amber and deep red. Across the body, in smooth black marker, was a signature, Elvis Presley. Tucked between the strings and the fretboard was an envelope. Inside, a single line, handwritten, "You'll always have a seat in the front row, Elvis." The ink was dark, fresh, slightly smudged at the end of his name, like the pen had lingered too long. Eddie ran his fingertips along the strings. They were cool and smooth, humming faintly when he pressed them. The case lining smelled faintly of cedar and old fabric. His mother held the note with both hands, staring at it as if afraid it might vanish. Tears rolled down her cheeks before she even realized she was crying. Eddie sat on the couch, the guitar balanced carefully on his knees. His hands were small, barely able to wrap around the neck, but he pressed down a single string, and the sound was quiet, slightly out of tune, and yet it filled the room. His mother covered her mouth, the sound pulling her straight back to the moment on stage when Elvis had knelt beside her son. The guitar wasn't just a gift. It was a reminder, a connection to the man who had stopped an entire show for one boy's wish. But what it meant to their family was more than just a guitar. In the days that followed, neighbors dropped by to see it. Eddie's classmates heard the story and asked him to bring the guitar to school. His mother kept the note in a frame on the mantel, next to a faded ticket stub from that night. Years later, Eddie would still keep that guitar close, not locked away in a case, but out where he could play it. And the story of the night, Elvis Presley stopped a song, was about to become a family legacy. That guitar never went into storage. Eddie grew older, but the guitar was always within arm's reach, on a stand by his bed, leaned against a chair in the living room, or resting across his knees on the porch. Its finish dulled slightly over the years, the frets worn smooth where his fingers had pressed hundreds of chords. The black signature remained, bold and unbroken, protected by the care of someone who understood what it meant. By high school, Eddie was playing at school assemblies, nursing homes and community events. The same silk scarf Elvis had draped over his shoulders that night sometimes hung from the mic stand beside him. When people asked about the guitar, he would smile and tell the story, not with a performer's flourish, but with the quiet pride of someone who knew he had been part of something rare. The guitar's tone was warm, full, carrying the same gentle resonance it had on the night it first left Elvis's hands. Under Eddie's fingers, the strings sang in small living rooms,
echoing softly in hospital corridors, and ringing out in open-air parks on summer evenings. Even in those small venues, people leaned in to listen, the way the Vegas crowd had leaned forward decades earlier. His mother kept the framed note in the same spot on the mantel until the day she passed. It was her favorite story to tell guests. The night the king himself stopped the music for her boy. Years later, Eddie had children of his own. On one birthday, his daughter stood in the living room as he adjusted the microphone to her height, the same way Elvis had done for him. The sunlight through the window caught the edge of the guitar's lacquer just like the Vegas spotlight once had. According to local news archives, Eddie was invited back to Las Vegas in the early 2000s for a tribute event. He brought the guitar, not as a relic, but as an instrument, and played Love Me Tender on the same strings Elvis had once tuned. The family says that night in 1970s Vegas taught them a truth they've carried ever since. Kindness can stop the world, even for a king. The story was told at weddings, anniversaries, and around kitchen tables, and every time it ended the same way, with the image of Elvis Presley, in a gold-fringed jacket, under a hot spotlight, choosing to put the music aside so a boy could sing. If this story moved you, share it with someone who believes kindness can change a life, and tell me, if you had one wish on stage, what song would you sing?